Well, speaking of birthdays, we hit a milestone in our household this past week. On Thursday, we gained a teenager, so Titus turned 13. That was Thursday, and that same day, Zoe turned 8 weeks. So that's kind of a birthday, right? Pretty exciting stuff, though. So this isn't in my notes, but if you could just picture in your imagination, in your mind for a moment with me, if you could just picture Eden. And some of you are hunters or you enjoy nature, you go out into nature and you enjoy the beauty of that. So let's just this morning picture Eden for a moment. And the pristine beauty of what God created. And that experience of being just surrounded by beauty, and you see the green of the grass and the leaves and the breath of wind, and you feel the warmth of the sun, and you experience something special, I think, when you attend to those moments of beauty. And if we think back to Eden, I mean, even now we experience some of those beautiful things just in moments in our lives, and sometimes deliberately we put ourselves out in nature or creation, and we experience maybe something that God meant for us to feel. But what I'd like you to think about is that in Eden, it seems that the wall, if you will, between heaven and earth was ultra thin. It was because if you remember, Adam and Eve there in the garden, they were enjoying all the goodness God had made, and God had given them some things to do in that. But in the cool of the day, God just walked with them. And what a beautiful picture that is. That somehow seamlessly from heaven to earth, God simply walked with this couple that he had placed in his good creation. So that image maybe belongs in the furniture of our imagination. This morning, actually, the talk is the problem of Lent, so I'm not sure. Well, it's not real. It's not just because Lent's a 4-letter word, though. It's deeper than that. Actually, it's Jesus and the problem of Lent. And so I think the problem with Lent is maybe that there's something in me that rebels against being asked to give up something that I enjoy. I think that's the problem with Lent. If you have a Bible and you'd like to follow along, I've got some questions, really, which are Jesus questions. And I'll take all of these from John's Gospel. Last week, Elmer was sharing something of this question that Jesus asked a man in Luke. And that question was, what do you want? What do you want? And the question there in Luke is in a little bit different context. But this same question is in the Gospel of John. And it's in the first chapter of John. And so here's our first question. These are Jesus' questions, and it's getting at maybe the problem of Lent, or the problem at least that's in me that rebels against giving something up that I enjoy. One of the interesting things about how John opens is how the prologue, the first 18 lines, 18 verses or so, are deliberately echoing that creation. In the beginning, God. that we heard in the opening line of Genesis. And so the context for this question is starting off, at least as the gospel writer is showing us, that we're in a new creation kind of story. There are deliberate echoes here of God's wise ordering of the world. And in this opening, as we go from the prologue then into the opening scenes of the narrative, what we have is a bunch of confusion. We have a bunch of confusion about who is this person that we're about to hear about. And then there's also this corresponding confusion. There's this invitation to come and see who Jesus is. And so that's how the gospel begins. And just if you look in the first chapter at the range of ideas, from the prologue, you have these kind of have to be metaphors, right? There's the word, there's life, there's light. And so we're talking about this person of Jesus, and we're in a high-grade metaphor. And then the questions that people are having is this Messiah? Is this Elijah? Is this the prophet? Is this God's Lamb? Is this the Son of God? Is this the rabbi? Is this a teacher? Is this the anointed one? Is this Christ? Is it Jesus from Nazareth? Is it Joseph's son? Is this the Son of Man? And all of those are in that first chapter. And there's this, who is this person we're looking at? And it's this person that the Gospel of John presents to us, this person of Jesus who is asking the question, what do you want? What is it you want? What do you want? See, the context immediately surrounding this question is there's a bunch of people who are kind of in the whole renewal religious thing with John the Baptist. And they see Jesus, and they start to follow him. And Jesus says, what do you want? What do you want? Well, I know how I would have answered that question as a young person. I probably wouldn't have been able to say it this way when I was then, but as a young person, as a person who grew up in church, I wanted to live life on my own terms and get out of hell. I mean, really, I did. I didn't want to go to hell when I died, but I wanted to also live life on my own terms. Even as just a young guy, I wanted to feel comfortable and safe. I wanted my fire insurance, and I can remember thinking as a young person, I actually thought this way. Prayer is not my thing. When I go to heaven, I'll spend time with God, and that will be good. That's down the road. That's maybe when I'm an adult, prayer will matter, but right now I can't be bothered. And that's what I thought. The reality is actually that Jesus is rewriting that script in me. I actually don't think that anymore, and it has to be because of what he's done in me. I was actually, this question, I feel like Jesus was asking me this question, and I think my answer to it now, here in the last week and a half ago or so, is I want to be loved. I want to experience, God, your love, because I think that will change me. And if I could just know that, if I could just live in that, if I knew that you love me, if I could feel that you love me, that would somehow change me. But it's not just that I want to be loved. I actually want to love as well. And I think that's a kind of a different thing than what I used to feel. In our context, though, in our time, what is it you want? Do you want to see heaven opened? Do you want to see that that separation of heaven and earth evaporate so that God walks with you in your life? Do you want to see more than you already have of God's reality, his relational rule? And so that's, I think, the first question that Jesus is asking me, and maybe he's asking this of you as well. What do you want? What do you want? John chapter 5 has another question that Jesus asks. The question is to a man who is kind of hanging out with the sick folk at this particular place in Jerusalem where some people get healed. It's kind of a special place, and he's been there. There are blind people there. There are the lame. There are the paralyzed. And the Gospel of John in chapter 5 says this: the man who had been there in the same sick state for 38 years, Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he had been there a long time already. And that's when Jesus asked this question: do you want to get well? I think we can agree that people who are blind and lame and paralyzed can't do anything to fix themselves. You can't make yourself see if you're blind. You can't, by wanting to, turn the eyesight on. If your leg is broken, you can't make it start working again just by wanting to. If you're paralyzed, you can't move even if you want to. You can't fix yourself. And maybe you're like me in the way that I see myself in the man's response there in John chapter 5. The man says, basically, I can't fix myself. I don't have help. And I think probably this is where it kind of feels true of me as well. He basically says that healing happens always for someone else, not me. And Jesus is asking those of us who feel that, he's asking, do you want to get well? Do you want to be well? And maybe this is where Lent comes back in. Because what Jesus does is, in this conversation, this question and this man's response, which is kind of whiny, really, Jesus says, get up. Pick up your bed. Go. Walk around. The man does it. He's healed in that moment. And maybe this is where Lent comes in. And maybe Lent is a way of Jesus' invitation to us. Do you want to be healed? Get up. Break your inactivity. This may be the wisdom of Lent, right? That God, in his design of humans, has given us bodies as a resource for our spiritual life. You think of Jesus. No one on earth more filled with God's Spirit. God's Spirit sends him into the wilderness. He fasts. He goes without food for 40 days. And that's where we get our 40 days of Lent thing from. Jesus fast. He uses his body in a fast, going without food, so that he defeats the devil at the end of that sequence, if you remember that. Do you want to get well? I guess it was at the start of Lent, we had in our bulletin a list of things that we could give up for Lent. And I spent probably, 1.35 seconds looking at that list at the time. But I just want to say a few things that were on that list. Some things to give up for Lent included fear. I would like to give up fear. But my problem is I can't do that. I can't, by wanting to, get rid of fear. Need to please. I'd like to give that up too. Impatience. Fear of failure. Doubt, self-pity, pride, anger. These are things on the list that I'd like to give up for Lent, and my problem is that I can't, just by wanting to give those things up. But I was also encouraged by what Elmer shared last week too, that he did something in what he was giving up for Lent. He was giving up what did you say, like desserts, or he was going without. You guys remember? No, maybe you don't remember. Okay, so something like that. Okay, so and that encouraged me because now I can do that. I can, and I'm giving up snacks. And I don't think it has made me as grumpy and irritable as I thought it would. I've gone without snacks these last days, and I have to tell you that what's happened to me is that I have been able to respond to God in a kind of a fresh way. I feel more drawn to God. I feel interested in spending time with Him. But all I did was I just said, body, you're not going to have a snack for these 40 days. And that's something that I can do. And when I do that, that thing that indirectly somehow supports heaven and earth coming together, that somehow I am able then to be aware of God's Spirit drawing me to Jesus, drawing me to the Father. And I don't know if you were able to choose to give up something for Lent. And it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter if you're doing it for these 40 days or the next 40 days. You can do something, just like Jesus is saying, do you want to be healed? Get up. Now, the guy didn't heal himself by getting up. God's grace healed him. It was a gift. God heals him. Jesus gives him health. And I feel like that's what Jesus is doing in me, too. Well, anyway, that's the question. Do you want to get well? I guess if you're wondering about whether or not I'm more grumpy or irritable, you could ask my family. They would know. Let's see, what else? Yep, okay. Oh, right. It's also fascinating, I think, that the guy who Jesus heals doesn't even know that it's Jesus who healed him. Later, Jesus kind of connects with him, and he says, don't sin anymore. But it was after all of that healing took place. So, if you're keeping track, what do you want? Do you want to get well? Jesus questions to us. Third question, John 18. Who are you looking for? Who are you looking for? The context here is actually that of betrayal. These disciples who have been with Jesus for the Gospel of John, for all this time that Jesus has been doing ministry, They've spent these years with Jesus, and Judas is collaborating with others who oppose Jesus who are not Jesus followers, and they are coming to arrest Jesus. Jesus asked this question twice. As Judas and his band come to take Jesus to the cross, who are you looking for? Jesus of Nazareth is who we're looking for. Well, Jesus says, that's me. Who are you looking for? As they come to get Jesus, he asks them this question, who are you looking for? It's a scene of betrayal. And it's not just Judas who betrays Jesus. The Gospels tell us that all of the disciples run. We have this sequence then of Peter kind of in a vivid way having the opportunity to acknowledge that he's with Jesus. And each time he denies Jesus. He does that 3 times. Actually, one of the things I was noticing is that the gospel just really seems to go out of its way to play up this theme of betrayal. It happens in other ways as well. And this, to me, is full of irony, right? If you recall those opening questions in John, who Jesus is, it seems ironically paralleled here. Because Jesus' invitation to those who he asked, "What do you want?" The answer was to come and see, come and see. Now we've seen for 18 chapters who Jesus is, and we see the betrayal here, and even by Peter, who was this rock. And you'll recall things that Jesus said about him, his confession being a foundational thing. And I'm reminded then of, like even what Elmer said last week, of wanting to be the hero of the stories that he tells. And I know that that's true of me too. I do have misaligned motivations. Yes, I want God's good, but sometimes that's just because I want to be seen as good. And even when I'm not, I want people to think that I am. Like right now, I'm hoping that you feel I'm doing a reasonably competent job up here. Yeah, that didn't go okay. I've been looking out for me. Who are you looking for? So that motivation, I'm looking for me, hidden in my heart, betrays me in my impatience with interruptions, my irrational anger at little inconveniences, my slowness to serve. Yes, I follow Jesus, but I betray him too. And maybe that's why I find this last scene in John so hopeful. It's a series of questions that Jesus asks in John 20. Here's the context. Jesus has gone through death. Out the other side, he's been resurrected. He's eating some Lenten fish with his band of brothers. Well, actually, it wasn't Lent fish, but anyway, it was fish. And 3 times Peter has denied Jesus, and Jesus seems to want Peter back into the vocation that he had called for Peter to be a fisher of men, shepherd, right? And so Jesus comes to Peter with this question: do you love me? Do you love me? Can you hear Jesus asking that? Do you love me? Peter's like, well, Jesus, you know everything. You know that I love you, or you know that I'm your follower, or at least you know that I'm your friend. You know that I kind of like to hang out with you. I mean, I'm here, for example. Do you love me? Jesus asks. And Peter says, Jesus, you know I'm your friend. You know everything. And so Jesus asked Peter again, Peter, do you love me? And Peter says, I'm your friend. And what's interesting is that on the third time Jesus asks the question, he doesn't say, Peter, do you love me? Listen to what he does. Peter, are you really my friend? You see, Jesus is taking that betrayal and what Peter is from that betrayal, and Jesus is meeting him right where he's at. Jesus, you know everything. You know that I'm your friend. And Jesus accepts that in Peter, and he renews his vocation. Your job to feed my sheep. This is crazy because it reminds me of Genesis when God gave Adam and Eve vocation to take Eden everywhere. And in Jesus, we find our vocation to take Eden, to take the life of heaven, that life with God, out into everywhere. Anyway, look at how Jesus answers Peter. He gets to his heart. Look at how Jesus reacts to our failures. He starts asking us questions like, what are you looking for? Do you want to be healed? What do you want? Do you love me? Jesus already knows our condition. And so we can be honest with him about the degree to which we do or do not want him to be part of our lives. We can be honest with him about the degree to which we do or do not want him in our lives. And I think it's really powerful how Jesus comes to us right where we are. He's already forgiven our sins. His grace and truth meet us exactly where we're at. He adopts us into his family. He welcomes us to this renewed vocation, this new creation life. He invites us to follow him. He invites us to train for the life of heaven, like by giving something up for Lent, by doing these little things that train our bodies in this life. And it's not because his grace is insufficient that he asks us to do those things, but because it is. You know, we're saved by grace. And it's like we're paralyzed by it too. Do you want to be healed? Get up. One of my mentors in kind of thinking about spirituality and how to develop a life with God has been this, the late Dallas Willard. I never met the guy, but I encountered him through his books. He says this, the secret of the blessed life is this, God with us. Which, if true, means that we would expect our lives to be very different from the ordinary. If God is with us, we would expect our lives to be very different than the ordinary. And the question is, do we want this? I have a little article that he wrote, that Willard wrote, that talks about how to spend one day with Jesus. And this is actually in Jesus' teaching on prayer, isn't it? It's in the Lord's Prayer. He says, "Give us this day." If we can spend one day with Jesus, that could be happening the next day and the next, out through your 40 days and into eternity. Let's pray. Jesus, you've asked us some questions. You've asked us what we want. And we're just going to be honest with you about that in this moment. Jesus, you ask us if we want to be healed. So just in this moment, would you show us where we need to get up? Jesus, you ask us who it is we're looking for. In this moment, we just want to be honest with you about who we're looking for. And Jesus, you ask us, do we love you? And Jesus, we want to say yes to that. But it's like the reality of our lives is that you're our friend sometimes. I just want to be honest with you about where we're at with that. And so, Father, as we've considered these questions of Jesus, I do ask that your kingdom would come, that your relational rule would reign in our world, and that our very lives would reflect the beauty of heaven. Amen.